I want to address this idea of so many people feeling that they may be a starseed. How would one know if they are indeed a starseed or not?
A spiritual awakening that's extremely profound, and they tend to have a rapid evolution. They're very creative, they're very sensitive, they have this innate spiritual wisdom, the incension of the soul. What do you mean incension? Don't you mean ascension? It's like, no, you have to ascend. You have to ascend. You have to anchor into the physical body. You have to really become human, because this ascension is all about moving through it in our human bodies.
Right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks.
Last week on Higher Journeys, we had quite the profound conversation with my special guest, Steve Mara, as well as Stephen Bassett, where we talked about what I have always referred to as more of the mechanistic aspect of the phenomenon we call UFO and UAP. We're actually talking about these major drone incursions, is what they're being called. And of course, there was a very lively debate as to whether these are man-made technology that we're unaware of, or could it be phenomena? Now, in that episode, I also had a chance to tease the show that you're about to see right now with two very special people. One person I have known for quite a long time, Barbara Lamb, who's joining me, as well as a brand new guest, Sheila Seppi. We are going to talk about, on the other end of the spectrum of what we talked about last week, the phenomenological aspects of reality in general, really. We're going to be talking about starseeds, hybrids, and walk-ins. And I'm really anxious to find out from these two lovely ladies what the some of the more nuanced, as well as the implications of what this all means. And I really want to dig into the idea of so many people feeling themselves to be starseeds, and if they are, how might you find out what that's all about? And furthermore, how do we raise our consciousness to be able to ignite our multidimensional self? We're going to be covering a lot of stuff, guys. So first, let me formally welcome back, Barbara Lamb and Ms. Sheila Seppi. Thank you, ladies, for joining me today.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Yes.
Well, I think it's a beautiful time to be having this continued conversation. And I promise you guys, and I'm speaking to the audience, I call the journeyers, we're going to be getting into this other side of the spectrum of phenomena a lot more, because there are, ladies, a lot of people that are very, very curious about what exactly a star seed is, as well as walk-ins. This idea of walk-in, I'm actually going to start with Sheila. The idea of walk-ins, it can be an elusive phrase, an elusive term. I would love for you to explain, give us a little bit of a short sheet of what you refer to as a soul exchange walk-in, of which you believe yourself to be.
Yes. And so a soul exchange walk in is just that. It is a soul exchange where one soul exits the body and another soul comes in. Last night, I heard someone refer to it as a soul transfer. So you can look at it as the opportunity that has basically been struck between two souls in the development of their soul plan, that at a particular juncture in time, one soul would leave and another soul would come in, occupying the host body, taking on unresolved karma, moving through any and all cellular imprints. Now, some people say, well, wait a minute, karma is specific to a soul. It is specific to a soul. However, because of the way that the human genetics is made up for this body, and because we are holographic beings by nature, and we exist within a holographic grid, when we have our divine blueprint for our human body, it imprints on the cells, actually creating the body. Then we have a soul that enters in, which also imprints onto the cellular structure. When the other soul leaves, the walk out leaves, then what's left is the imprintation of the karma. And so that karma is worked through by the soul that agrees to take on that situation. In my case, I entered into the body of a 38-year-old woman. She was very, very sick. She had been diagnosed with bone cancer, brain tumors, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, walked with a cane, had the beginning stages of rheumatoid arthritis as well as multiple sclerosis. And so that body was very, very sick. To me, this was one of the exit strategies that had been put in place in that birth plan. Now, there were other incidences throughout the life where that soul could have exited, but this was the time it chose because it had either gathered all of the information that it needed for this lifetime, or it was just so weak. And that's what I believe to be the case, that it was just so weak that it really needed to go back and to be rejuvenated. But not everyone comes in as a soul exchange.
Okay.
Some people will come in as infusions or mergers, and we can talk about all of those. But to answer your question, it's when one soul vacates the body and a new soul comes in.
hmm I have to thank you for that. Very, very lucid, and yet it's very complex. There's a lot of layers to this. I can't help but notice, Sheila, that you spoke of, I would say, yourself as in the third person. Are you literally feeling that this is a person that is not you anymore?
The me that was here prior to the walk-in no longer exist. My thought patterns, my behavioral patterns, my the way that I go about doing things, my tastes, my personality, everything is now tied in with the soul that occupies this body. The other person, when I entered into the body, everyone noticed. Everything shifted, not just because I was instantaneously healed, but because all of a sudden I had all of the gifts. I was able to be clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, have the smelling, everything all at one time. Plus, everything in my life changed, from the way that I viewed things to my articulation level to the
Mhm.
foods that I ate, the music, the way I dressed. 100% of my personality, was completely changed, and everyone noticed that. And so anything prior to the walk-in event, which was September of 99, anything prior to that, yes, I do refer to as her, because I've come in and occupied a body that was already imprinted upon. And still, I'm going to tell you, this ancestral clearing stuff is for the birds, because
Mm,
every time you think you have everything cleared, up pops another layer.
yeah.
It's like, oh, I thought I just cleared that. I thought I just cleared that.
Where is Sheila, the former Sheila now? How does she exist if she still exists? In
Um, well, the beautiful thing is we're all eternal beings, and there is no such thing as death. I remember being on the other side. I remember coming into this body. I remember exiting bodies before. And so there is no death. And so she has gone on to further her soul's growth. Because remember, we all have a birth plan. I have one, you have one, Barbara, all of the listeners, we all have a birth plan. And sometimes in that birth plan, there are various exit strategies. Now, when the soul of this body decided that it was going to leave, and the soul cried out to be released, that was heard by my collective and all of those beings that I was attached to in the collective consciousness. That's a long story in and of itself. But it was decided at that point that I would be the aspect to come in and to take over this life. And so there was a deal that was immediately struck. Now, when I say immediate, that would be in Earth time, we think it's immediate. However, on the other side, there's lots of planning. And because all time is happening at once and
Mhm.
time is actually non-linear, in this planning, it was determined that I would come in and she would be allowed to exit and go about her own soul's path.
Wow. I want to bring in Barbara at this point. Barbara, I know you have a multiplicity of experience in all of these areas. You've been doing regression work in some form or fashion for over 30 years, my God, and you're respected by so many. How and when did you get more involved in the walk-in aspect of the scope of your work?
Well, it actually happened on a very specific occasion in about 1990. I was at a conference with my past life regression therapy colleagues. It was a past life regression conference. And over breakfast one day, one of my colleagues was talking about a situation that she had been working with a client. And it was a whole new thing for her to discover through their regression therapy that client of hers was a walk-in, and she found this client found that she was allergic to just about everything on Earth. It was really having a very difficult time, and that allergic reaction phenomenon started just suddenly one day. She had never had that before. And so they did quite a few regressions. And my colleague did not know about the walk in phenomenon before that. But that's when they discovered that this person had come in to that body. And because she was a soul not being experienced being here on Earth, she immediately became allergic to just about everything,
Hmm.
which made life extremely difficult. So, anyway, my colleague had never heard of that before, nor had I. But it opened my eyes to the fact that, oh, isn't that interesting that a soul from somewhere else could come in and live in a body, and that they had discovered it was a mutual agreement between the original person and the walk in being. And so I just, sort of took that in as added into many new things I was learning in those years. And then it was only about a year and a half later that I was at a conference and met a couple, a married couple, middle aged people, who were telling me that they were totally baffled because their own daughter had just suddenly changed overnight from being very materialistically oriented and business oriented to suddenly talking about wanting to open up and own a metaphysical bookstore with a lecture room attached to it so that she could be teaching about metaphysics and spirituality. And the parents thought, well, that's very nice, but why is she so different? What happened? And they did not know about walk-ins when they talked to me. But the more that they talked, I thought, this sounds to me like a walk-in situation. So fortunately, I was able to meet the daughter, who was about age 26 at the time, and we did a regression and found out, yes, indeed, she had come from an extraterrestrial realm where she had been for a long, long time, and came into the walk-in situation so that she could do that work. So then I saw that same young woman, a year or so later, and sure enough, she had secured some property and had opened a metaphysical bookstore with a lecture room. And we did a regression again. And that time, she was in the middle of teaching her class, and she noticed she could have glanced out the window and noticed that somebody was there. And when she looked again, she realized that somebody was her extraterrestrial father from her life there. So she went out and had a very happy reunion with him. So that was the first person I actually worked with. And then it was maybe a year or so later that I met a young woman in Southern California who had suddenly become very, very different too. And she came from a spiritual realm. I visited her for a whole day and we did some work together. And she had come in from a spiritual realm and made the exchange with a woman who was here. And that life completely changed. And in many cases, with these situations with the walk-ins, if the original person, the walk-out, as Sheila has said, is married, very often those marriages just cannot last because the new person is just so different
Absolutely.
in person. So anyway, it developed from there that every couple of years or so, another person would come to me one way or the other, usually for a regression because they were confused and I just wanted to understand themselves better. And we discovered that they were walk-ins.
Wow.
And eventually, very wonderfully, I met Sheila a few years ago and was very happy to know that she was a walk-in. We did some work together, and it's just been opening up, in my understanding, more and more for some years now.
And as a result, in a culmination, you have co-authored a book with Sheila called Cosmic Convergence, Journey to Walk-in Starseeds and Hybrids. So we obviously want to reference that. You know, Sheila, Barbara made reference to one of the stories that she told about the individual who the parents out of the blue didn't recognize anymore, right? She went from being, you know, a totally, let's just say a left brain type of person to very spiritually oriented seemingly overnight. And I recall, Sheila, you saying in one of the interviews I've heard you speak about your own experience that your own mother, when you were going through this transference, thought you may have had Alzheimer's.
Absolutely.
It was that drastic. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was. The incident that brought it, if you want to say to a head, is we had gone to a funeral and there were lots of family members there. There were people that I had gone to high school with, a lot of people that the old Sheila would have considered, you know, some of her besties. And people would come up and talk to me and I had absolutely no idea who they were.
Really?
That's one of the things that concerned me when I first came in is I had no previous memories. The only memories that I had were a few of my children, which I had an immediate love for,
Mm.
and memories for my parents with whom I also had an immediate love. And so, but that was it. And all of my other friends at the time began to fall away because we had nothing in common. I couldn't resonate with them any longer. And so, as a result of going to this funeral, when we returned home, my mom did sit me down on a couch and said she wanted to have a talk with me. And she was like, no, she was really emphatic. You need to sit down. So I thought, uh-oh, she's got some bad news she wants to share. But instead, she said, I noticed not just at the funeral, but many times you don't even recognize the people you went to school with, or you'll start to share something or start to deflect something that's totally unrelated just to not be able to talk to them about what they've asked you. And of course, at that point, I really had no choice but to sit down and to explain to her that I was a walk-in soul. And I did so by saying, you know, in a very loving and gentle way, and in a way that I thought she would be able to understand, is I said, well, you remember when I was sick? And she goes, yes. And she goes, and I remember you healed just like that. I said, yes. And I said, that's when the walk-in came into the body. So that means the old soul that was in this body left and a new soul came in. And the very first response was, does that mean I'm not your mother? And I said, no. You are my mother, just to a new and improved version. We never talked about it again.
So she was very open to it. She didn't push back at all because
She
obviously to the
did
average person this would sound preposterous, right? But she
Right.
didn't.
No, she did not,
Thank God for that.
because she had witnessed enough changes in me. She had seen enough of the results of my actions, because immediately I started studying healing and doing laying hands on people, et cetera, et cetera. And I was having phenomenal results, some of which she had experienced herself. The old Sheila had none of those capabilities, nor did she have any interest. Also, they noticed things like, another time I went with them to a funeral, and the person that we were going to see actually showed up in the car. And I'm sitting, and that's the first time that had happened. I'm sitting in the back seat and I'm just looking. It's like, okay, I'm not looking. I'm not, okay, I'm looking,
Mm,
you
mm.
know. And this person began to talk to me and share things about their dissatisfaction with the way they were being laid out. And the fact that there was the wrong fingernail polish, and they had the hair combed to the left and it should have been to the right, and different things. And so when I got out of the vehicle, I kind of pulled my dad aside and I said, look, I know you're going to think I'm crazy, but this is what just happened. And I explained everything in detail. And I said, I know, I said, I can't go in and tell people, they're going to think that I'm crazy. My dad literally patted me on the head and he's like, it's okay, honey. You're what they call psychic. I'll take care of it. You know?
Wow. What a
And
blessing. What a
that's how
blessing.
that's how I've been received by my family.
That's a blessing. Well, look, we're
Well,
talking to an audience with, I'm sure, it's a potpourri of scenarios, right?
Yes.
People that have had spiritual awakenings. I really want to talk about this sort of crossover between an awakening, near-death experience, being a hybrid, being a starseed, being a walk-in. All of these situations are becoming top of awareness, I think, in today's world.
Yes.
Um, to speak to those who may be listening and watching that may not be met with a circle of family and friends that would be as open to understanding this, what would you say to them?
We are living at a time of great challenge and incredible opportunity. A time when taking life into our own hands, charting our own course, and finding our own answers is more accessible than ever before. During this time, you may be asking yourself, what am I called to do? What if I could discover not only my own inner healing power, but help others all over this planet discover theirs? We all have the ability to heal ourselves, but it takes a special approach, a unique approach. Quantum healing hypnosis technique, also known as QHHT, a method developed by pioneering hypnotherapist and past life regression expert Dolores Cannon, is the approach that thousands have used and taught to access the deeper aspect of the self for healing at the core level. We all have the ability to tap into the higher self, the oversoul, the higher consciousness, and we have the means to help others to do the same. QHHT is designed to help the individual access the subconscious, the storehouse of all information, through visualization at the deepest level imaginable, a process that Dolores Cannon discovered and refined during her decades of working with individuals from around the globe. Training with QHHT will provide the guidance and give you the tools to help others tap that incredible force within. Now, you can access this exclusive training online, bringing the tools needed right to you so you can assist others in finding their own answers and achieve total healing. This is powerful and needed now more than ever. Be a part of the pioneering work and legacy of Dolores Cannon by learning QHHT. Start today by clicking on the link in the description of this show to get started. And when you do, don't forget to mention Higher Journeys to get a 10% course discount when you sign up. It's time we all take back control of our lives and chart the course for success at every level. It's time to discover the power of quantum healing hypnosis technique by helping others to help themselves. And by doing this, we are helping to heal the world.
Either one of you, Barbara, I'd like to hear from both of you on that.
Okay. Well,
I think it would be better to speak about this.
okay. Well, one of the things, there are so many podcasts out there now. There are so many Starseeds, so many walk-ins, so many hybrid groups that people can become part of. When I came in almost 25 years ago, there was absolutely nothing
Mhm.
available. We barely had the internet. We were still using telephone directories and looking things up in encyclopedias, And so now there's a plethora of information. So the first thing, of course, we would tell people to buy our book, Cosma. We want people to go ahead and to purchase that Cosmic Convergence Journey of Walk-in Starseeds and Hybrids, because not only are we talking about walk-in starseeds and hybrids and have chapters dedicated to that and even talk about some of the telltale signs, but we also are talking about a lot of the universal truths that exist out there. We're talking about dimensions and densities. We're talking about, the harmonic universe. We're talking about different planes of existence. And I've tried to break that down into very digestible chunks because I know it can be overwhelming. But once we have a foundational knowledge of even what a timeline is, and what does it mean if a timeline collapses, how can that affect us? Once we understand some of these basic principles, then in ourselves, we're able to open up a little bit more and say, wow, okay, the fact that I come from another planet is not so far out there. I can understand this progression. And I also have a whole section that we're talking about the incension of the soul. And now,
Mhm.
a lot of people, they're like, what do you mean incension? Don't you mean ascension? It's like, no, you have to ascend.
Interesting. I thought you said ascension
Yes,
initially.
no,
Okay.
you have to ascend. It's incension. You have to ascend. You have to anchor into the physical body. You have to really become human, because this ascension is all about moving through it in our human bodies.
Absolutely. I love it.
And so, yes, we have to ascend before we can ascend.
Ascend.
Mhm.
Say that one more time.
Yeah, we have to ascend before we can ascend.
I love it. Let's take note of that, everyone. I want to mention Ruth Montgomery, somebody who I've followed for many, many years. And she was really the one that popularized the term walk-ins back in the 1970s. She wrote the book Strangers Among Us, in which she talked about it. I have a few other books from her. But it's just interesting. This has always fascinated me. This idea of walk-in, and you're bringing some dimensions, literally and figuratively, to the understanding of this that I had not been aware of. But I now want to move into star seeds. And some people will use the terms loosely interchangeably because I know that there's some interrelationship and yet they're not necessarily one and the same. Let's delineate, and then we can cover the hybrids as well. But what would you say the difference is fundamentally between being a walk-in and being a star seed?
Well, a walk-in is when one soul exits the body or is augmented by various soul aspects. A star seed is a soul that comes from another planet, and a hybrid is both human and extraterrestrial, and
Mhm.
they're like a vessel. So a hybrid could be hold a walk-in body that came from Andromeda. So they're so interchangeable. Really, if we can supersede the terms that we're talking about, we look at everything, it's all soul experience. So when
Absolutely.
I came in, my soul had to come in from somewhere. I just happened to come in from a collective. When your soul came in, it may have come in from the Pleiades. When Barbara's soul came in, it could have come in from an angelic realm. And
Mhm.
so we have to come from somewhere. Very few people are what I call earth seeds. And
Mhm.
those are the individuals who made a contract with Gaia, that have been here since the very formation of this planet. And as far as my knowledge goes, all four variations of it. And
Mhm.
so, when I first came in, I was anchored in through the Hopi teachings. And so they talk about we live in the fourth world, getting ready to move into that fifth world.
Mhm.
And so, we all have to come from somewhere.
Yeah. I'm going to apologize to the audience because we're getting a bit of feedback, but we're going to try to push through. It almost sounds like we've got company on the line, but
Mhm.
I don't know. It could be because just feedback. So bear with us, guys, because it's such a great conversation. I want to make sure you can hear everything. I want to address this idea of so many people feeling that they may be a star seed. as I think I mentioned to you offline, my next door neighbor in my new home of South Carolina, of course, I won't mention the name. He, former military guy, right? Defense contractor, sat me down not that long ago and said, Alexis, I had an experience while on assignment in Saudi Arabia that would be akin to an awakening. And he came back from that experience feeling that he too was and is a starseed. It's happening a lot. And there are a lot of people asking questions. How would one know if they are indeed a starseed or not? How would
Well,
one know?
I have a lot of people coming to me for regression work with that very question. Well, they don't even mention the word starseed. What they come is to find out what their real purpose is in being in this life. And they'll say things like, I've been working for 20 years in the financial industry and I've done very well. But I just feel that there's something else I'm supposed to be doing, that's more sort of helpful, more of service to fellow people. And I've had this urge for years and years, even since I was a child. And I just feel I haven't gotten to that yet. So I'd like to know what that is. So I've had many people, especially in the last 3 years or so, who've come to me for regression work with that very concern. And so we will do a regression, and I will direct their attention to being very open for wisdom from their own higher knowing, their higher self, with help from their guides and their soul wisdom. And so it's that type of regression that we do. And then they hear in that session, they hear and they know what their abilities are that maybe they haven't been using very much. They may be psychic abilities or healing abilities or, many different kinds of skills. And that it's time to really start learning more about that and practicing those skills and giving those skills to their fellow men. And they come out of those sessions feeling, oh, I am so relieved to know. And then we talk more about the fact that they might be a starseed, in the sense that they always have felt that before this lifetime, they had had a lot of connections with what we call extraterrestrial beings. So they don't seem to have the genetics of extraterrestrial beings like the hybrids do, but they definitely had that lineage, that background. And very often they then recognize that they have actually been having contact with those beings, even if they had not consciously known that
As a starseed is what
before.
you're saying. As a starseed, in other words, starseeds having contact with non-human intelligence.
Yes.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
Right. And then we sort of begin to put terms on it, like star seeds. I'll talk about star seeds, and then they'll say, yeah, I have that character. Yes, that fits me. Oh, yeah, you're talking about me. So then we conclude that that person might be a star seed.
Okay. Let's
So,
talk about some of the characteristics. Let's say someone that, for whatever reason, won't get a regression or doesn't want to get a regression, isn't ready, but wants to do a little bit of self-investigating because they have a sense that something is going on. They may have heard the term, but they're not sure. What would be some of the characteristics? I'd love to hear from both of you that an individual would point to as being possibly a starseed.
well, I think that primarily they would have a sense that they're here to help somehow, help fellow people more than they have been doing. Sometimes that takes more the form of being very helpful to animals, or sometimes to help the earth itself. And very often, of course, to help fellow people. So there's that sense of service, that somehow they're supposed to be doing something larger and bigger and more significant in terms of helpfulness than whatever it is that they've been doing up to that point. And some of them feel that it's important to acquaint people with the fact that there are all these other beings out in space in other dimensions as well, that we're not alone as people, as so many humans have thought, I think, up till recent times. And so they're expanding people's awareness. They want to, at least. And they find that in a lot of their conversations with other people, that it takes some of these other aspects, like what are we all doing to help? We're very concerned about people's health, for instance. So what are we doing? What are you doing? What am I doing? In other words, always sort of looking for that way to serve and help, and in many cases to educate people about the other intelligences, the other beings there on Earth.
Yeah.
So Sheila, you could probably add to that.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes, absolutely, Sheila. I just wanted to say, as I'm losing my train of thought, I think it's time for Sheila to say something. It'll come back to me. Go ahead, Sheila.
Okay.
Literally lost it.
Yeah, one of the other things that starseeds will talk about is they feel like they're out of place. They feel like, maybe their family is not their family, or that they literally have been dumped here. That's what a lot of people tell me. It's like, I think I've just been dumped here. My spaceship has left. And speaking of space, they do have an insatiable curiosity about the stars and space itself. They also have like a spiritual awakening that's extremely profound, and they tend to have a rapid evolution. So they'll go through this period of spiritual awakening, they begin to transform, and immediately they start studying metaphysics and esoterics and spiritual teachings. A lot of times their intuition or their psychic abilities are extremely high. They'll have, very vivid dreams. Some people even report telepathy, and a lot of people, of course, report clairvoyance or channeling. The other thing is they'll tend to be very empathetic and sensitive. Barbara kind of alluded to that with how they work with animals and that strong desire to be in service to people. But one of the things I've also noticed, a lot of star seeds have this built-in sense of justice. And so they're very vocal when they think that things are not moving in a balanced way. They're very against violence, cruelty, any kind of injustice, actually, whether it's on a personal or a global level. Um, they can be drawn to holistic practices, but there is a whole list in our book that we go through, and we go in depth, as well as talking about the different star systems or planets that they could have come from. So, a lot of people say that they believe they're from Pleiades. So if they originated in the Pleiades, often they're very creative, they're very sensitive, they have this innate spiritual wisdom about them, and they really have this deep connection with nature. If they're Lyran, they may have this courage or this, fortification, this pioneering spirit or creativity about them as well. And of course, the Lyrans are believed to have played a significant role in the seeding of humanity throughout the galaxy. So we really go in depth in the book. So if people are interested in that, we'd love for them to read Cosmic Convergence, Journeys of Walking Starseeds and
Oh, no question. We're going to make sure we have a link to that, because it sounds like a veritable encyclopedia. And again, because the interest, whether on a cursory level or an investment and an urgency, and that's what I wanted to bring up prior to your last comment, Sheila, in terms of this clear sense of urgency that people that are having these feelings want to get on with it. I
Yes.
want to get both of your perspectives on the now. What's happening now? We're right around the corner from, even though time is not linear, in human time, a new year. And they do the new year, the years tend to be marked with events. From a soul perspective, as insofar as it relates to this sense of urgency, do either one of you sense that we're on the precipice of something really big happening in
Yeah.
2025?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I used to joke and say that's one of the reasons that I incarnated, because here on Earth, we've got the greatest seat in the galaxy as to what is really getting ready to happen and has already started happening. I was talking with someone today, and they are a spiritual leader in their community, and they were talking about all the shifts and changes taking place in their life. And it's like, I lead a spiritual life. I don't understand why all of these things are starting to come up, or why these incidences or situations or people are starting to show up in my life. And I have to remind people, the brighter your light, the more darkness can be revealed around you. And that's exactly what's happening on the planet right now. The light quota of the collective consciousness is raising in its vibratory status. And when we reach a certain oscillation, we literally will teeter into what a lot of people call the new earth. Now, that comes about through a variety of things. It can come about through, a lot of people are talking about a solar flash, which does not necessarily mean destruction on the planet, but there will be a shifting and a parting of ways. And a lot of people are seeing that. A lot of relationships are breaking up. A lot of people are quitting their jobs. A lot of people are moving across the country. They don't know why, but they're just being called to do it. That's because our soul is leading us into these higher vibrational locations, or to life situations where we're not as impacted by these lower frequencies. And so, what my collective is telling me, that towards the end of 2026 and the beginning of 2027 and through 2027, that we are going to begin to really undeniably be able to see this shift in consciousness. And some people are even predicting, which I try to stay out of that, because our timelines are populated by, the narratives that we bring into them. We exist in this field of possibilities. So if enough people think one way, that becomes the likelihood of that timeline becoming our reality. But a lot of people are talking about the fact that, our skies, there will be something that occurs in the skies that is undeniable, that everyone worldwide will see. Some people are talking about there'll be holographic, if you want to say, storyboards about Earth's true history. Other people are talking about the solar flash. Other people are talking about mass sightings of craft. So, I don't know what's going to happen, but I know it's going to be exciting, and I'm glad I'm here for the ride.
Right. Best seat in the galaxy, as you said. I think that's perfectly apropos. And I'm nodding my head voraciously because, yes, indeed, we're hearing from so many people these visions that they're getting in the form of dreams, myself included, by the way. I've had a series of dreams, speaking of Miguel Mendonça, one of which landed on the cover of one of his books, which I was also featured in, about a series of dreams that I had about a mass sighting that was unequivocal and undeniable. And we'll go into that maybe a little bit later. But yes, I'm not alone in that. This is clearly happening across the board, and to people who might otherwise not be normally talking about these subjects. So clearly we're being primed for a paradigm shift indeed. Barbara, your thoughts on that?
Well, more and more of the dark sort of happenings are coming to light. I mean, every single day, even just on my one little cell phone, there are notices about one more uh, atrocity that's been going on and has been uncovered, or tunnels underground tunnels of trafficking of people, etc. I mean, it just goes on and on. So more and more is definitely being revealed from the quote unquote dark side of activity that's been happening here, while more and more people are sort of waking up and coming into the light and uh, having a more spiritual, positive emphasis. So it's very interesting. It's kind of this big teeter totter or juggling match going on now more than ever that I've been aware of, at least in my lifetime,
Yeah.
or heard about.
I agree with you. I
Very,
mean,
very
I'm
dynamic.
thinking of well, the atrocities every day. They get more and more heinous, and unfortunately, I think by some they're so desensitized to it, it's become the new normal. But it is not. I do indeed believe that there is everything springs from the metaphysical, as far as I'm concerned, into the physical, and
Yes.
certainly the darkness that has been hidden for so long has to come to light. I'm thinking of, I don't know if you're following in any form, the Sean P. Diddy Combs saga, which is begetting a lot more of uncovering of industries and the darkness associated with industries, an industry that I
Right.
came from, the entertainment industry, many,
Yep.
many years ago. Thank God I got out of Hollywood when I did. So yes, I'm glad that's a good pickup, Barbara. I'm glad you brought that up because that cannot be ignored. It would seem that in polite spiritual company, you wouldn't have these conversations. I happen to think it's very important to not only have a conversation about the exposure of it, but the significance of why it's happening now. And
Right.
these are not disparate things. These are very, very connected. I'd love to get your thoughts, Sheila, on that.
Absolutely, because just like we're talking about, everything has to come to light. You have to remember we live in a multidimensional reality, and part of that reality is the dualism. That's part of why the soul will incarnate. Again, it's for the experience of growth. And so we definitely want to come into a place that's going to stretch us. We want to come into places to where we can look and we see atrocity. We want to come into places where there's catastrophes so we can be of service, so we can learn to be compassionate, so we can open up our hearts. And if we rise above it and we look at the larger picture, everyone's a soul, even those who we think are the darkest of dark on this planet. And I know during the election time, a lot of people were so angry and they were this and they were that and da 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 da. And I'm like, and you can drop into your gratitude that they chose to take on that role to bring enlightenment to society. You can drop into gratitude because you do not have to play that role and be one of the most hated people on the planet or one of the most beloved people on the planet or one who has the media following you around all of the time. You can drop into your gratitude that someone else has taken on that role, that they can serve as a trigger for you, because in that triggering, you begin to learn those areas about yourself that truly need healing. When we find that something is not acceptable, we look at ourselves and we can figure out why that's not acceptable. When someone angers us, we can look at that behavior and ask ourselves, what about that behavior is reflected in me? What is it that I might need to change? How do I need to grow? Because in reality, if we are totally healed, if we're standing in the wholeness of our light selves in this false matrix plane, when these things happen to us, we have zero response
Mhm.
because we know that everything comes within that source energy for the edification and the growth of the soul.
I love it. There is wisdom in neutrality, I think, and observation.
Yes.
And I think you're touching on that. I do think that's so important. We all can be reminded of that because it seems that this false matrix that you brought up, aptly so, is also designed to be a trigger mechanism.
Yes.
And when we're triggered toward things that are not that we really don't need to be spending a lot of time on, or triggered to respond in a certain way, we take ourselves further and further away from that, from the light. I believe so. again, observation has always been something for me, rather than to render an opinion on something, which is something that we're always being encouraged to do. I say, let me just have a look at it. I may not have an opinion ever. So anyway, I digress. Listen, we're going to wind, I can't believe we're going to wind down in a little bit, but I want to remind the audience, you know what this means, guys, when I go like this, right? Or this way. We're going to the Patreon after show. We're going to talk about this. Is going to be so cool, because guess what else, as it relates to all of this, we're going to be talking about light language, because Sheila is a light language linguist, something that folks are also popping up doing. So we're going to say that for the after show, but we still have a few more minutes before we wind down. The term collective, the collective, multidimensional aspects of self, all of these, again, terms that are bandied about a lot. What might you say about, particularly insofar as it relates to what we just talked about, the darkness coming to light, et cetera, the collective? What do we have to do with all of that, or what should we be doing with all of that? And then we can get into the multidimensional aspects a little bit more.
One of the things that I talked about is the holographic nature of humanity as well as the universe. And so we are all interwoven together, extending from us out about 3 to 5 feet all the way around us. Most everyone knows we have our own energy field, or our aura. And there are lots of things contained within that. However, when we step outside of that aura, the energy that we emanate is fed into that matrixing that is around us. Okay. That matrixing is considered the collective consciousness. Every person on this planet is sending frequency out into this field. And this field extends all the way from beneath us, all the way down to the crystalline grid, all the way up to the crystalline grid that surrounds the planet. And it's there that all the consciousness units of humanity are held. Now, within these consciousness units, as I said, if you're looking from above the earth, looking down on the earth, you see the collective consciousness of humanity as little bitty spots of light all over the planet. Okay. And just like if someone's in a spaceship and, they're taking photos of the earth and you say, oh my gosh,
Absolutely.
there's New York. Well, just imagine that's humanity lighting up.
I love it. And I have to put this in. You're using the term CUs, consciousness units, which is a term that the entity known as Seth used constantly. I have not heard that term in a long time. That's really powerful. Continue. I'm loving it.
Yeah. Well, because we all come from source, we are consciousness units of the source itself. We are individuated consciousness units. That these consciousness units continue to grow throughout however we manifest ourselves, whether it's a human at this time on the planet, whether we are in the Palladian system, whether we're in a different universe. These consciousness units are always growing and they're gathering information. So all of us here on the planet are also emanating and gathering information. And that all helps with our soul. Now, when we talk about our multidimensionality, there's various layers of that. So whether we're talking about dimensions, densities, holographic universes, let's set that aside for a moment and look at us as individuals, the multidimensionality. If you'll remember, we all begin with source. And as we begin to individuate, we come through that monadic structure, which we're already talking about a plasmatic field of consciousness, which is source itself. But imagine that being able to have this realm that goes around it, being the monadic energy that holds all of the templates, all of the thought forms of source. Within those templates, there is one template for the oversouls and for the soul structures. From that, we come down and we have a master oversoul From there, we come down and our frequencies begin to gather in soul groups and soul families. And those soul families then are made up of primary or individual oversouls. And I always use my fist as the oversoul. If this is our oversoul, all of these little fingers are what my collective calls the Shantias Khan. The Shantias Khan holds all of the information that is necessary for any particular lifetime. It holds a higher self stream. It holds our holographic fields, our spiritual, mental, emotional, causal, all of our various bodies and matrix fields. It holds our holographic form. It holds our chakra information, our meridians. It holds everything that there is about us as a soul. So when the soul begins to incarnate, or it's actually the higher self stream begins to incarnate in the body as it gets denser and denser and denser, that energy out here is called the spiritual self.
Mm-hmm.
What connects to the body is our soul essence or the personality of this particular lifetime. So we can never escape this or our oversoul, but we can be having an experience on Earth, the Pleiades. We can be having a parallel lifetime in Earth. We can be an aquatic being in the Sirian system. We can be all types of different things. And sometimes there's a resonance between them. And all of a sudden we begin to gather all this information about a system that we have no knowledge of, which may actually be coming from our higher self, which is being fed by one of the Shantias Khans.
Wow.
So we are always a multidimensional being having a human experience.
I have never heard anything explained so articulately and so it's complex. There's no question about it, but you've articulated so succinctly as far as I'm concerned. And as you're explaining, even just a little piece of that tells me exactly how it is we're able to see someone who is now considered discarnate, no longer corporeal, because that form and the personality is still intact. It can be you might be getting something outside of the human personality that you remember, or you could be getting that plus the personality. It just makes perfect sense. I mean, there's people still to this day that just won't believe. Not only do they not believe in the other side, they don't believe that you can communicate with the other side. Well, it makes perfect sense as you're explaining this.
Right. Well, also because we exist in the astral. That lower astral is all around us, and that is the place of our guides, of our angels, but it's also the place of discarnate spirits. And when we move up to that next level, that's the place where we have all the halls of learning or the Akashic information. We move up a little bit higher, and that's the place people call heaven or paradise. But guess what? There's a whole lot past that
Oh,
as
yes,
well.
absolutely.
So
Yeah,
much more. And
right.
so for people that believe in heaven, they'll, because whatever we believe in is what's created for us on the other
Absolutely. That's
side.
a very holographic idea,
Yes.
indeed. Mhm.
And as we're there for a period of time, there's going to come a knock on the door one day. It says, Sheila, it's time to get back to work. You think you want to just sit here in heaven fishing or whatever you're doing, for
Right.
eternity? We don't think so. And so, we are constantly evolving.
No question. Barbara, I have to get your weigh in on this in terms of what has been the most fascinating aspect to all of this and still just kind of like a pinch me moment for you and what you've learned over these years, particularly with the wonderful work that Sheila's brought to the table.
Well, of course, I grew up not knowing anything about any of these things we've been talking about, but always from early childhood, I've been one of those people who wondered. I wondered what else there was besides the material world that we were living in. So I always had that sense of searching. And so, very fortunately, as I've grown up and matured more and more and worked with more and more people and learned about the variations that there are in people and then in dimensions and other worlds and other civilizations way beyond us. It's been a very, very fascinating ride for
Mhm.
me. And at this point, I'm continuing to learn and about different dimensions, different variations of everything. And Sheila has a wonderful way of bringing out so many of these different aspects of reality. And I think that in our book, it's a really wonderful combination of, of these theories, shall we say, that Sheila is so well aware of and good at explaining. And also, we're bringing it down to a very practical, personal level, too,
Mhm.
of
Mhm.
having a whole portion of the book devoted to actual, real case studies.
Oh, great.
Well, I have worked with in regression. We have about 5 or 6 of these cases for each of the categories, that is, walk ins and star seeds and hybrids. So it kind of um, it expands us the whole book, and also it brings us down to a very practical level that people might be able to relate to.
I think
And
that's
I think
great.
that these days, as you mentioned earlier yourself, more and more people are talking about being a starseed. Well, that is certainly true. And more people are talking about, oh, maybe I'm a hybrid, because there are certain clues to being a hybrid. Or maybe I'm a walk in because I'm so different than I used to be 10 years ago, or things of that sort. So uh, we're giving a very practical way as well of people identifying to these different kinds of people
Absolutely.
here. And
So
I
I'm
think that
sorry.
that's a good thing
Oh,
too.
so important. Oh my gosh. Well, of course, we're going to have a link to this wonderful book, Cosmic Convergence Journey. And journey is aptly said, journey of walk-ins, journey of star seeds, journey of hybrids. And I think that the epiphanies will continue with people. This book I know will help. We will have a link. Barbara and Sheila, there are just so many people that are just hungry to understand what heretofore has not been understood nor tolerated, frankly, by unfortunately still a majority of our population that has an ignorance toward this and are not caring as much as they should. I certainly hope that that paradigm changes over time, but big things are happening. And Sheila, girlfriend, I agree with you. This is the best seat in the cosmos, in the galaxy. It is fantastic.
Right.
I know that you both have great websites, sheilaseppi.com, right? I've been there. I went there and it's good. Go there, everyone. We'll have a link. And Barbara Lamb Regression.com. Barbara, I heard a rumor that you've retired, though. Is that true?
So I retired from my psychotherapy practice,
Okay.
counseling psychotherapy, which I did ever since 1976. And then I moved geographically to San Diego a few years ago and
Mhm.
gave up that part of my work, but I have definitely been continuing with my regression work,
Perfect.
and
We need
still
you.
and continue to keep on doing that. And I mean, that's my greatest love at this point. I'm following my bliss.
Good for you. Oh, thank goodness. Whew. When I saw retired, I thought, does that mean she's no longer in service to humanity in this way? Good.
Uh,
Oh my
just that
goodness. Well, and
portion.
you have worked so hard. Yeah, you've worked so hard and so um passionately. And you're loved by so many, Barbara, I know, and people ask about you all the time. So we're glad to see you're still on the scene at the most critical time. So I thank you.
Yes, yes.
And Sheila, I thank you so much, my dear. I would love to have, of course, Barbara is always welcome back. And Sheila, this is your formal invitation to, or informal as it were, to come back and share more with us. But as I mentioned, we're going to go next door and we're going to talk about light language. People, light language. What do you think? Listen, I want to hear from you. I obviously want to hear your thoughts about this conversation. Please put your questions. I might even be able to get them over to Barbara and Sheila after the fact. So let's have a conversation on this side as well. So With that, I'm going to sign off and say thank you so much to you, both lovely ladies and lovely souls,
Oh,
for
thank you.
being with me and being with the Higher Journeys audience. So I'm going to say bye-bye for now, and we will talk to
Thank
you real
you.
soon. Take care.